introduce Warden Randall Liberty.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's really nice to see friendly faces and friends that I've made while I've been at the prison. I get tired when I hear that resume. I've been at it for 36 years, and I've enjoyed every bit of my career, both in law enforcement, corrections, and in the Army. I truly enjoyed the time that I spent serving in the Army. As a drill sergeant, I loved the mentorship piece. I loved leading troops in combat as much as you can, and building those relationships with not only my 10-man team, but the team that was the Iraqis, the 772 Iraqi soldiers. And some of the things I enjoyed most about the Army was the cultural experience. I did 14 months in Korea, and I lived with a bunch of Korean Katusas, and they are wonderful, and I enjoyed their culture. I also enjoyed the time that I spent with my Sunni, Shia, and Kurd soldiers in Fallujah. I had all three tribes in that battalion, so it'll give you a really interesting perspective. And we lived together, slept together, ate together, cried together, fought together, and that was a really rich cultural experience. I enjoyed that. In Iraq, I wish I had more opportunity to get into communities and spend time with families and that sort of thing, but Fallujah didn't allow that at the time. What I hope to do here today is talk about my experience a little bit. I'll open the dialogue about post-traumatic stress, how it impacts all of us. How we often assume that post-traumatic stress, is commonly associated with soldiers and soldiering and the violence of war, but that's not the case. Post-traumatic stress impacts many, many of us in the communities. And that's why it's a relevant discussion and a topic for us to speak about today and to speak about as a community, and how can we help those with post-traumatic stress, what's available out there, how we should talk about it as a community and help each other along. And I say this to my staff a lot because, in corrections and in law enforcement, there's a lot of trauma, and there's a lot of things that we see and do often on a daily basis that most people don't have to endure. And I tell them that if we don't take care of each other, who's going to take care of us? And that's the same with this community. As I live in Clinton in central Maine, and when I drove to Damascus today, I said, why don't I live in Damascus? This whole mid-coast thing, you have a special thing going on here. You really do. I think a lot of people are drawn here, so you're fortunate to have this as a community in the mid-coast. Really, really neat. So I have a few slides, and then I have a short video that I like to show, part of a documentary that I did with Jennifer Rooks in Maine Public Broadcasting. As you can see, I was Sheriff of Kennebec County. I retired. I was able to do 26 years there. While I was there, I was a canine handler, a rescue diver. So if somebody drove on the ice, went through the ice, I was that guy. And so over the years, I've pulled 19 victims from lakes, rivers, and streams. That's that's haunting, to say the least. I'd like to say that if I get emotional today, it's because of the trauma, and I've had a lot of treatment, but I have a lot of trauma too. So the question for me is what I observe is a lot of people have trauma. A lot of people have demons, for whatever the source may be, and it's a natural response to being exposed to that. So it's okay. So when I open the folder about the 19 victims in lakes, rivers, and streams, it opens a file. So it's okay. I wouldn't trade that time. The thing is, the exposure I've had both in combat and rescue diving, or fatal accidents, or death notifications, homicide scenes, all of those things, I wouldn't trade that. I hold dear public service and helping the community, helping my nation for whatever they need me to do to assist and protect our freedoms. I wouldn't trade that for anything. So I'm okay. It's a price to be paid, I think, for what we do for our country and our communities. When we look at post-traumatic stress, that's the kind of the typical thing you would think, right? The soldier who's war-torn, too much exposure to trauma. Today's soldiers, it's all volunteer military. So it's a different piece than folks that were drafted and forced to go to combat, maybe, where you have poor young folks fighting poor young folks in other countries. That's kind of what we do. And today's Army, for me, and Marines I fought with, all volunteer. So 18-year-old kids, 19-year-old kids fighting other 18, 19-year-old kids, and it's a different game. We had it better in some ways in that we were When we were returned, we were appreciated, praised. Like when I came through the Atlanta airport, still had our desert camis on, standing ovation. Wonderful. World War I, World War II, got that. Korea was forgotten, and Vietnam was disdained, right? Those veterans. We owe them a debt of gratitude. Any Vietnam veterans here? Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you for your service. Truly. A bit different in that all of my peers were volunteers, but there's a downside to that too. So we arrived, not only were we volunteers in the Army, but when the 98th Division asked for 40 10-man teams to embed with all these Iraqi soldiers all over the country, I had my hand way up in the air, couldn't wait to go. And the statute says that, the regulation says you have to give soldiers 30 days advance notice so they can prepare their families and all of that. And then we had to sign a waiver to be on these MIT teams because we're embedded and it could be a little dangerous. And so I put my hand up real quick and I couldn't wait to go, and I had to leave in 10 days, and away we went. And another price of deploying and all of that, it's a family affair, right? Combat's a family affair. Just like mental health is a family affair, drug addiction is a family affair. Everyone's brought along for the ride, right? So my wife told me, she said, listen, if you get ordered to go to Iraq, great, go, but do not volunteer to go. So, and being the drill sergeant, the sergeant major, I said, I don't need anybody to tell me duty. We've been at war for a few years, and it's important for me to go. I've trained, privates and West Point graduates that went, and I haven't gone yet. It's time for me to go. I'm going to volunteer. And she said, if you go, there's going to be problems. Guys, when your wife says that, take heed. So I deployed, I came back, and divorced 6 months later. So yeah, and I own the blame for that. I came back and I was impaired too. Not only did I go and put the family through all of that, I had 12 and 10-year-old daughters, and but I feel like my nation called, and it was my duty to go, and away I went. So it's not just a soldier thing, though. It's a situation where anybody can be impacted by a lot of different sources of trauma. For me, and I'll talk about kind of my exposure, my experience. Post-traumatic stress, it's a natural response to the traumatic incidents that you're involved in. For me, whether it be the death notifications, the rescue stuff, the suicides, all of those things, could be that. Could be some firefights I've been into in combat. I was at the range a few years ago practicing with my law enforcement deputies, and we're on the range practicing. And I was on my knees practicing as though I'd been knocked to my knees, and I still had to engage the target. And I was shot in the back at the range by one of my deputies. I know, So all those things kind of throw on the rucksack, and you have 100 pounds on your back with that trauma. But it's important that on the right-hand side, law enforcement, combat, the combination of, in today's wars, there are a lot of firefighter, EMT, police officers with a lot of psychological trauma already. And then we go off to war for a year or 2 or 3, depending on how many times we deploy. And then it turns into a deal, we come right back into it, we're re-triggered. So 2 weeks after I came back from Iraq, I was doing a rescue dive in Cobbossee, and I pulled a 19-year-old up. And there I am on the bottom thinking, here we go again. More exposure. Carrying a weapon, smelling the breakthrough on the weapon, smelling the gunpowder when I'm at the range, loud noises, smell diesel, smell whatever your trigger may be, the diesel exhaust brings it back, or canvas smell is very much like the Army, or baby crying, or that kind of thing brings it back. On the left-hand side, there's some more traumatic experience that happens as children. Children that witness domestic violence, that is traumatic, and that scars them emotionally. I had some of that growing up too. I was in a situation as a child. My dad was abusive to my mother, physically and emotionally, and was a drinker, and was criminal. He actually spent time at the Maine State Prison. How'd that happen? It's America, right? Land of opportunity. So, well, the first time I went to the Maine State Prison was to visit my father in 1971. And then I went back 36 years later as a warden. Wow! So, who saw that coming? But we travel these journeys, and it can serve a good purpose for us, right? So I can now have a good perspective on people that visit, family members that are involved. I get it. And when they say you don't understand, I say, no, I do understand. I've traveled that journey. So as a child, there's a lot of traumatic things that happen that stick with kids and impacts them for a long, long time. It's important for the parents to know and the grandparents to know. Now I'm a grandparent. We're along for the ride oftentimes, right? As our children do things. But there is an impact. So it's obvious to me, as a law enforcement officer going to calls, as a soldier, as a deputy, as a sheriff, as a diver, as all of that, there are many, many sources of trauma that occurs and creates post-traumatic stress. I've been to many, many homes and observed many, many things that many of you have, and you wonder how the children are ever going to, struggle through this journey and do well as they get older. And combat's the obvious one I've spoken about. I said it was a bit different for the volunteers. We go in country, we volunteer to be there. We're there for 365, a full year. 5 days into it, we have a heavy firefight, we lose 18 guys. 18 guys, and when I say lose, I'm being polite. For those of you that experienced that, you don't lose them. They get shot, and they cry and moan, and you try to save them. Yeah, they're the people you love. Very few wounds are immediate to deaths, unless it's catastrophic, maybe a roadside bomb or something. But usually it's the individual gets wounded, usually he's 18, 19 years old. Very, very difficult to work that. We were 6 miles away from Camp Fallujah. We lived in the city, and we had to travel 6 miles through enemy territory to get them to help. I was a combat lifesaver, an EMT. I can run some IVs, I can do some things. When you have significant internal wounds caused by roadside bombs or 7.62 or an AK-47, a lot of trauma. It's trauma-producing weapons and causes that. So 5 days into it, we're enduring that, and my buddies and I look at each other, and we're not going to make it out of here. Can you imagine doing that to yourself? It's one thing if the judge says go to war, go to jail, right? Or you're drafted as an 18, 19-year-old kid, and I don't want to go, but I'll go because you tell me. But it's another thing to say, I want to volunteer, I want to do this. We all look at each other like, what have we done? What have we done? I'm from Clinton, SED 49, Lawrence High School, and the Benton Elementary School children sent us a bunch of Christmas cards. And they're very naive, 4th, 5th graders, and they sent one card that said, do you have any hope of ever making it out alive? He doesn't know. Teachers, please screen that stuff. Right? So we'd put that on the wall, and every time I go on a mission, we'd touch it, and away we'd go for good luck. But that was real. We had that feeling, And as a sergeant major, whenever we had a mission, and I had my 10 Americans around, I'd say we're sending 150 Iraqis, an Iraqi infantry company, to Ramadi, or to Haditha Dam, or to Heat, and for missions. And we provide a lot of bodies for those missions. And I'd ask my Americans, looking for 2 volunteers. Yeah. Sometimes hands would go up, sometimes they wouldn't. So some of that burden of mine was to say, Heinzelman, Levesque, you're good. And once I appointed that, they're good to go. Roger, that's our major, I'm on it. No reluctance at all. But they know the reality of the danger of those missions, I'll tell you, the American soldiers, absolutely fantastic. Any Marines here? The Marines are a national treasure. Those 18, 19-year-old kids are as good as they've ever been. I'm very impressed with them. You think about this. This generation of warriors, and I'm partial to the infantry, but those 18, 19-year-old kids that join the Marine Corps infantry, Army infantry, they're volunteering to be infantrymen in a time of combat. They know they're going to deploy. Think about that commitment. We owe them a debt of gratitude. When they come back and they're discharged from active duty, I think our communities have a debt to them to help them transition back. That's why I do what I can do for them when they become police involved in other things. I think we have that duty. We wave the flags and yellow ribbons around our trees, but the real work is helping them transition back. And we need to employ them. We need to make sure that they get on track with education. We need to find them housing and help them along the way. No handouts, just a handout. So domestic violence is another one, as I mentioned. That's a major source for both the children that witness it and then the victims, the spouses that are receiving domestic violence. There are certainly things and resources in the communities that we can do to help. Sexual assault, I see an awful lot of trouble with sexual assault occurring. Sexual abuse, neglect, incarceration. Do you think that being incarcerated causes trauma? Absolutely does. The volunteers that are here in the crowd that spend time in the prison know that those individuals are traumatized from being incarcerated. And so one of the things that I'm committed to do is recognizing that why do people arrive in prison? Why are they there? They're there because of trauma, mental health, substance abuse issues, right? Maybe learning disabilities. Maybe they were 4, 5, 6 years old. The learning disabilities weren't corrected in time. They stumbled through their academic career. Maybe they dropped out in 10th grade. Maybe all those things. Maybe they lived in a non-pro-social environment. Maybe addiction, abuse at home. Very, very few people that volunteer in the prison will ever tell you that they're evil people in there. They've had a very difficult journey, made some bad choices, but they're as human as the rest of us are. And I think everybody in the room will agree that we should all believe in redemption. You have to. Look at us. We all fall short. Anybody here not fall short? No? Me included? Anybody ever break the law? Put them up, Bob. We've all done things we haven't gotten caught for, right? So just as something to think about before we judge people, right? Bullying is another one, a really big one. Really big problem in our schools. Broke my heart. My stepson went to Winslow Elementary School or junior high, and I'm always in the schools just roaming in, and when I was a sheriff I always went in just to check doors and make sure windows are secure, nobody's roaming around. And I went into the chow hall, we call it in the Army, the dining facility, and I saw all the kids over here, and I saw him sitting alone at a table. I know! I'm thinking, teachers, this is 2016 back then, what are you doing allowing children to be ostracized? Why would you ever allow that? You know, that's scarring, that's difficult. You know, we went through a little process, and I got him out of that school, and he went to Lawrence, but it worked out well. But you wonder year after year when that kid's not picked for the team, or that kid's called names, or someone throws a shoulder into him. What does that do to him emotionally, and what does that do long term for him? Certainly doesn't help our communities or his family or him individually to grow and be all that he can be. And then the moral wounds. There are some moral wounds that happen. For me in combat, it wasn't just a matter of being involved in that or seeing people being killed, but killing folks. Think about that, the moral wounds that you receive. And I think I see a broad view of this. And we go to war, and again, it's poor, young kids, teenagers, killing other poor young folks, right? I spoke to a group of Colby students, maybe 10 years ago now. They asked me to speak about Iraq when I first came back. I had all my stuff out. I had shrapnel and maps and all the paraphernalia I brought back from the war. And I said to the crowd, and at the time we were a divided nation. Half thought we shouldn't be there, half thought we should. I said, how many people in the room think we should be in Iraq right now in Afghanistan? And all the hands went up. These are all Colby students, right? I said, let me tell you a story, Colby students. Colby kids don't go to war. And I let that set for about 90 uncomfortable seconds, right? How many Bates, Bowman, Colby kids do you think ran off to war? No. If your family, the reality in American history and in the world history, if your family's of means and you're college bound, you don't grab a rifle and go fight. That's kind of generally how it goes. Are there exceptions? Absolutely there are exceptions. But generally speaking, those young kids that live in the trailer park, like me, are the ones that go off to war. Make sense?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. That's how I see it. The word according to Randy. Symptoms, my symptoms and other people's symptoms are, fear, that may or may not be grounded in reality. Even today, 12 years out of Iraq, when I get up in the middle of the night to go to the restroom, we all do that, right? Unfortunately. Get up and I go into the bathroom, and the moonlight shines through the window. I am aware. I'm aware that they can see me from the outside. Think about that. So when I was in combat, you never go by a window because the enemy can snipe you from there. I still think like that. That's my first thought. I can talk myself out of it. There's no sniper in the woods behind my house in Clinton, I don't think. Right? I do make friends in law enforcement though. But that's not real. I can talk myself out of that. But that's my first instinct. Stay away from the window because we know it takes a sniper 3 seconds to acquire his target. You're up 1,000, he sees you 1,000, he shoots you 1,000. So you kind of think about that. Anxiety. People have anxiety when you're triggered, and for me, going under overpasses, because when I was in the Hummer behind the 50 cal, when I went under an overpass, that's when they lob grenades or shoot at me from the overpass. So I'd always go in, and as I went under, I'd rotate the turret back to engage the threat, and so when I go under that now, that's my first instinctual thought. Or any disturbed earth or dead animal on the side of the road. Dead animal means there's an ID in that dead animal. And so that's how they did it. They put in olive oil cans, any trash, any disturbed earth, dead animals were a favorite. You could put a nice 155 howitzer round in there, wire it up, and then detonate it. I hit 2 roadside bombs when I was there. So this is real stuff for me, you know. And so, hang on, kids, we're going to buy a dead animal. You know, and it's strange because when we'd go through an intersection, I'd be up in the gun, and the driver would say, all clear. And I'd say, clear left, clear right. And it just dawned on me the other day, I pulled into an intersection, my wife said, clear right. I have them conditioned. It's a family affair. Hypervigilance, always being aware. You know, so like when I walked down the street this morning, I was kind of like, what if this happened? What if that happened? What would I do? Where would I take cover? Because as an infantry senior NCO, I'd have 10 Marines, 10 Iraqis would be walking the streets of Fallujah, and I always had to think, if we take fire, what do I do? If we take incoming, if someone throws a grenade, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I always have to plan about what happens, what happens, what happens. And so when it happens to me, it's not a surprise. So I think, you know, what happens if somebody runs out with a gun out of the bookstore? What do I do? What do I do? So hypervigilance, thinking that way. Anger, when I came back, I was quick to anger. Quick to anger. And I had one situation where when I came back, a couple of years later, I was the sheriff. A year later, I was the sheriff. I was elected. And I was in my unmarked truck. I was driving down the road. There was a gentleman in front of me driving. He thought I was too close to him. And so I had jeans and t-shirt. I was off duty. I had shorts and t-shirt and sandals on. And he gave me the finger. Ooh, it's go time. You know, I'm the sheriff. I put the blues on, pulled him over, and got out of the vehicle, opened his door, grabbed him and said, I'm going to F you up. I was that mad. Stupid. Absolutely stupid. You know? And he wouldn't come, and I pulled him. He said, sorry, I didn't know you were a cop. And we went through that for a bit. I slammed his door, broke his window, went back to the vehicle. My wife and my son were there, and I'm like, what is going on with you? And then, you know how wives can influence you? She said, you're going to tell us, man. You know, we are done with this. And so we did that. And I got help there, so it was very helpful. Isolation. A lot of guys and gals will just isolate in their room, isolate in their old home, isolate in their home, and they don't want to be bothered. They don't want to be bothered with people. And they're depressed maybe they're self-medicating. That all happens. Self-medication in previous generations was all about the alcohol, right? World War II, Korea, Vietnam, many bars in our communities, right? I think they said in Waterville there were 34 bars in Waterville. Everybody's drinking all the time. You know, that doesn't serve anybody well, but you're self-medicating. Unfortunately, today's people, you know, they come back from war and other things, they turn to drugs. And maybe pills or other opiates, and before you know it, it owns you. Because really, if you mess with that bull, you get the horns with opiates, right? We've all seen it. It's been difficult for our communities. Disturbing dreams. You know, I still have Army dreams. Some of them are crazy. Some of them are. I still have a recurring dream of. And this happened to me. I was up in my Hummer, nighttime, and no lights, driving through the streets, eerily quiet. Fallujah was like Portland. If you can imagine Portland being person-free and destroyed. Nighttime, driving through the street, very eerie, waiting for something to happen. And we went to a brigade training meeting, took the 50 cal out, locked it in, brought my M4, my M16 in, came back out. When I went back to my Hummer, I put my 50 cal on, I put my rifle out on the roof of the truck, and we drove, we left. 5 minutes later, I'm like, where's my gun? I reached over, and there it was. But the anxiety of, and the soldiers will tell you, if you lose your weapon, that's a very big deal. And so I still have that sort of anxiety from a couple different circumstances. And the triggering, and like I mentioned, triggering for me is noises, smells, sounds, maybe music. Sometimes before mission, I listen to tunes, get amped up a little bit. And those are the things that trigger me. My sources of trauma, as I indicated, were you know, a lot of domestic violence in my home, a lot of poverty. You know, the poor kid with misfitting clothes, and you know, it amazes me that back in the 70s had free hot lunch, right? And so the paying kids would go up and get their meal ticket, and then free hot lunch kids come forward, please. Are you kidding me? What are we doing? You know, exposing these kids to that. Here come the poor kids, and the kids are snickering when you get your free hot lunch ticket, right? What are we doing? Well, we're so much better than that. Rescue diving, fatal accidents. As sheriff and as chief, when I was the major, I always made sure that I did the death notifications because I never thought it was fair that we had a fatal accident and I send, you know, to the 50-year-old parents a 20-year-old deputy is still a child, right? He doesn't have the capacity to be able to deliver that message yet. And so it was important for me to be there with him, work with him, hug him, cry, pray, try to work through that initial trauma of receiving word that your child had been killed. So I've done 40 of those, and it was difficult. Suicides along with the victims, and the suicides that we see are horrendous. In this country, we force people that want to kill themselves to use a firearm, those kinds of things. So sexual assaults, to have to interview somebody and have to spend 3 hours with them to get a confession that they offended a year-old child. And there are things that investigators have to do, and things that we do. First thing I have to do is I have to establish rapport with this individual to get a confession. And I have to say things like, I understand what you're going through. I have similar thoughts. Can you imagine? You keep working that into the point where you befriend them, and then, then they exhale, open their posture, and you bow their heads, and here it comes. The nibble's coming. It's a real challenge to get those confessions. Me and many, many other law enforcement officers, that's what they do every day. Get those confessions is very difficult. And in today's world, have to see those graphic images. We have the Computer Crimes Task Force on the 3rd floor of the Maine Criminal Justice Academy. That's what they do. All the law enforcement agencies bring the laptops and cell phones, they download that stuff, and they search for illegal pornography, children pornography. That's what they do every day. Can you imagine seeing those images daily? A lot of trauma there. A lot of trauma. So crimes against children is difficult. In combat, it was the difficulty of killing, running down to the enemy, going through his pockets looking for military intelligence, maps, codes, frequencies, anything you can gather for intel to help with your fight, grabbing his wallet, opening it up. What do you see? His wife and children. He's just like me. And I'll tell you, if the Canadians invade, we laugh. We're very fortunate, right? We love the Canadians, best neighbors in the world. If they don't invade, who's going to be an insurgent here? A bunch of us are going to grab rifles, and we're going to lay IEDs, and we're going to snipe and ambush, and we're going to kill the enemy. So he's doing that because I'm an infidel in his city, and I killed his uncle 3 weeks ago. Nothing personal, for me. I'm just trying to do my duty and help them transition. But that's the kind of stuff when you look in that wall and you see those photos, tough stuff that haunts you. So those kids are fatherless now because of Randall Liberty from Clinton. That is the burden. Burden of command. As the command sergeant major, it is unspoken rule. I'm going to bring all you guys home. I'm going to bring every one of you home to your families. That's my duty. I have to train you, lead you, plan those missions, watch over you, don't put you in harm's way unnecessarily. And when one of you guys gets killed, you own that. And for me, it's like a rucksack, and I've got 100 pounds, and you keep throwing psychological trauma on that. Death of civilians, 350,000 people in that city. If you touch a 50 cal round off, which has a max range of 3,000 meters, it's like a shuttle going through the city. If you miss your target, that round keeps going and doesn't care what it hits. Okay, tough stuff. Compression of the tempo. For me, our environment with the 1st Marine Division, it was go, 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 go. We didn't live on a post, so a lot of troops will be on a base. They'll travel to a place, do a 3-day mission, and then go back to the post. You're inside the wire, it's quiet, you're safe, you've got guards all around the wire, everything's good. We pushed into the city, and we lived in the city, in the schoolhouse, for 10 months. And we did on average 25 to 30 combat patrols a day. So if I wasn't on patrol, other guys were. When they got hit, I had to respond to that. So it was a constant grind of that. And then in the end, like Vietnam, in the end, what was gained? So 18 months ago, we see that the city of Fallujah was taken over by ISIS. That's great, guys. I lost 103 guys. Now I'm triggered up, guys. But you think about that, lost 103 guys, all that sacrifice, personal and other, in blood and in treasure, all the work that we did, and the Iraqis throw their rifles down and run, like other foreign countries have done in the past. Now ISIS is driving our Hummers. What an insult. That the vehicle left behind, they're driving that around. So the gains is an important one. When I talk to a Korean vet, I see Korean hats, and I say, sir, thank you for your service. I was in Korea 30 years after you were. The Korean people are deeply appreciative of the work that you did there. Thank you. That's a victory. World War II, liberated Europe, liberated the Pacific, great. But something that is shared with Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan, man, what good came of it? That's the tough part of it. That's the tough part. And that's a burden that we share as Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan soldiers. Some of my symptoms: quick to anger, heightened sadness, as you just witnessed a little bit of that, anxiety, hyperactive. I've always been ADD anyways, and if I keep busy, I don't have to think about it. So my feet hit the ground, I'm rocking. Till the minute I jump in bed, sleep, and wake back up and go again. So hyperactive and hypervigilance, that was kind of mine. Those are my Iraqi soldiers behind you. The American U.S. Army and Marines said you have to have 4 Hummers when you go out on missions. We had pickup trucks. So when you hit a pickup truck with a roadside bomb, guess what happened? You know, very little survivability. But those are my guys. That's an insurgent. He's the bad guy that was defending his city and defending the honor of his family. What was he thinking? Following the war, what I did was I went to Togus VA, I got help. I did some in vivo and some prolonged exposure therapy. Some of you have done that sort of work before. Dr. Dave Meyer was fantastic. Every Tuesday at 1 o'clock I'd show up, and I was a sheriff at the time, and I was looking for anything not to go. Like hoping an accident happened, right? To roll to a scene. We're doing a search warrant, so I wouldn't have to go because I'd rip it off a scab. And so I'd get there, would spend an hour, dim the lights a little bit, he'd put a recorder above my feet, and he had me remember the most traumatic event that I was exposed to. And he'd say, okay, go ahead, Randy. And when I first started, I would be 5 seconds into it, wailing, really, of all that loss. And then over time, I have to continue to repeat it, and I would do things like, he'd say, explain it, and call signs, and what was happening. So I'd do things like, 120 degrees, I feel dirt in my teeth, which I had dirt in my teeth for the year. I'd say Bulldog 7, this is Razor over, go ahead, Razor. And I'd do the radio transmissions and what I was feeling when I was in the gun and what happened when I approached the scene and all of that. And over time, it got less and less. But the reality is, I'm better, but this is who I am now. I have some impairment from that trauma. And that's normal. That's the way it goes. In vivo, some of that stuff was like break free, the oil that's on my gun. That used to mean that I was pulling my M4 up to my nose and engaging the enemy. That oil, that lubrication. So Doc had me put some lubricant on my finger when I was keyboarding at work, and after about 90 days, break-free oils means I'm keyboarding as opposed to I'm engaging the enemy. Our minds are funny things, right? So that kind of exposure helped. And then mentorship. There are a bunch of organizations out there that are helping veterans transition. One of them is House in the Woods. Paul and Dee House from Lee, Maine. They're doing a great thing. They lost their son in the 1st Cavalry Division. He was killed in Baghdad. And they were hunter, fisher, Maine guide types folks. They established House in the Woods, which they have a fantastic lodge now. And he invited me up. We're at a veterans organization meeting, and he said to me, Randy, why don't you come up and go hunting? And he invited me to go bear hunting, which means, fast forward, I'm sitting in a lawn chair over a bag of donuts hanging from the tree. Like, what am I doing? What? This is hunting? If I give the bear a gun, then we're evenly matched, I guess. But anyway, so we did that. But the important thing was when we were driving out there, a Vietnam vet guide, by design and on the light, said, hey, Randy, how you doing? After some small talk, I said, good. He said, really? Because when I came back from Vietnam, I struggled a little bit. I did about 10 years in the bottle and went through a couple of divorces and had a hard time maintaining a job and isolated. And any of that going on for you? And we started talking, and that mentorship from a Vietnam veteran that had traveled that journey 30 years prior, priceless. It's just like with substance abuse. I can talk to the offenders in the prison about substance abuse. I can't really talk about it. I've witnessed childbirth. Ladies, can I talk about it? No. Right? So it's that's the powerful stuff. Mentorship, I found to be very helpful. Some of the stuff that's happening in Maine, there's a lot of work happening with Maine Military Community Network, which is kind of, if you pull that up, you'll see what's happening regionally. I think there are 6 regions in the state of Maine, and everybody that's advocating for those individuals, for veterans in that region, fall under that statewide umbrella. And I was the chairman in Kennebec County. We had a lot going on. I started when I came back from the war to screen all the inmates. We had 3,200 inmates come to the Kennebec County Sheriff's Office jail every year. Every one of them was asked, have you served in the military? And then we started that track. Have you deployed? take that folder, get a DD Form 214, which is the official record of their military service, and we verify whether or not the stuff is accurate, and then we put them on a track in a veterans unit. That pod had only veterans in it. So people, the shared experience, same lingo, new chain of command, veterans cling together and have an understanding. That was very successful. We brought Togus VA Vet Center, Peer Mentors of Maine, all of that resourcing to Kennebec Veterans Unit. We've done the same thing at the prison. We've done that, and that's about 5 months old now. We have 50 inmates, 49 inmates that are in that one pod right now, and it's decorated with military murals and lingo. And if there's a Vietnam vet in the pod, he's the boss, because we all concede the wisdom of the Vietnam vets, and we all respect them. And it's really interesting to see that happen. We have some vet dogs in there, so they're working and training dogs to become disabled veterans service dogs. And there are 4 in there now, and so the veterans feel as though they're still giving back to fellow veterans. That's going really, really well. Veterans Court, I worked with Justice Nancy Mills, and now Justice Everett Fowle. They have a court, part of the co-occurring disorder court that's happening in Somerset County, in Kennebec County, a Superior Court. Very, very successful. And I have some information I can pass on to you, show you what's going on. Peer Mentors of Maine, individuals going into the correctional facilities that are veterans and can share their stories. A Matter of Duty. I'll show you a clip of that. Jennifer Rooks came to me a couple of years after I came back from the war, and she knew I was doing veterans work. She knew I deployed to Iraq, and she had been wanting to work on a project, and she said, Randy, what do you think about doing a documentary on post-traumatic stress, maybe a bit of your story, follow some veterans that had deployed both Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq, all 3 of those, and about their journey, their struggle, their police contact, what's happening. So we did that, and some of you have seen it. It's if you Google A Matter of Duty, Maine Public Broadcasting, that documentary is on there, and it kind of brings to light what we're doing with veterans that are in the criminal justice system. And we were able to take that Matter of Duty and do a lot of work. Went to Dallas-Fort Worth, went to Charlotte, went to Fort Lauderdale. I'd like to go to Fort Lauderdale now, you? We're able to work that. Then we created a roadshow where we trained law enforcement, corrections, and EMS, firefighter EMT types in a 3-hour block on what to expect when you come in contact with a veteran, what you have for resources, rather than incarcerate them, figure out another way to kind of deal with that. The question is, one of the questions is, how can we help? What can we do? Domestic violence, kids witnessing it, combat, violence of being a victim of a crime, which is significant, right? Could you do me a favor? Could you grab Pam? So what can we do? There are some things we can do to help that I've found to be helpful for me. If any of you have read John Maxwell's 360 Leadership, we're doing a lot of that work in the prison. And the primary piece of that is, can we influence from where we are? Can we be leaders wherever we are in an organization or a community? Can we lead? And I believe we can. So I think it's important for us to educate yourself. One of the best sources I found for education for post-traumatic stress is the Post-Traumatic Stress Journal, which has a lot of resource. And some of the articles that are part of that journal, things like 8 myths about post-traumatic stress we need to stop believing. This is all online. If you have interest in educating yourself about post-traumatic stress, there's another one on canines and how they can help service members, another one on tips to prevent, for parenting while you're struggling with post-traumatic stress. All kinds of information there to educate yourself. Another really good way is to inform yourself of resources in the area. I know there are some communities that have a lot of resources, others struggle with resourcing, but I think that you'll find that in this area there are resources that you can work with, like the Maine Military Community Network, like the anything with sexual assault or domestic violence or awareness for bullying and how it's everyone's problem. I mentioned already about healing through mentorship, treatment and addiction and education. It's very, very important that if you're asking, how can you help, especially people that are elder and have the wisdom of life. A 20-year-old kid has very little to offer, but somebody that's been around, has been a parent, has been a grandparent, that has been around and can share that wisdom, very, very important to volunteer and One thing that the Army has done very well, and the Marine Corps has done in the last 10 years, they do resiliency training, which prior to people going to combat, they have master trainers that actually sort of harden them psychologically for acceptance of a bunch of different things. And that's reduced the amount of post-traumatic stress when people return. That work, that 40-hour block of instruction for the 18-year-old kid not knowing what to experience and how to deal with all the trauma that they may witness, resiliency programming and training prior to is really important. Really, really important. This stuff's all online. If you look up U.S. Army resiliency training, the curriculum's all there, all the information's there, and I'm certain that you could take some of those principles and use those in your communities and your organizations without any doubt. And the post-traumatic stress journal, I would definitely take a look at that. Go ahead. So what we're going to do is, I have a disc right here. Thank you. I'm going to show you a little bit of 10 minutes or so of the matter of duty, and so you can kind of get a taste of that. If you ever wanted me to present a matter of duty or have a discussion about a matter of duty or do anything in the community, I'd be glad to do that. One of the things that was important for me is that as a sheriff, as a...
Local support for this program is provided by MPBN.
Yeah, as a leader, it's really important that we show people that even the tough guys, the infantry guys, the sergeant major, the drill sergeant, the cop, really important not to play the I'm tough, I suck it up, I can do it. The Army is really poor at feelings. You know, I remember as a drill sergeant, some of you know this, walking down the bay and out here, there'd be 64 soldiers all in one room, and I hear one of them crying because he's homesick, you know? And I'd take the cover off his head and I'd say, do not contaminate my Army with your weakness. I look back at that now, I'm sorry guys. But try to toughen them and prepare them for combat. What we're not really good at is sharing feelings and debriefing that stuff. As a sergeant major in combat, I could not cry and carry on in front of my troops, right? So I had to be very, mission, get the job done. And there's a saying in the Army, mission first, troops always. You always take care of the troops, but that mission is number one. When the mission comes down from the higher headquarters, you carry that mission out. I had one individual that was, when we were in Kukush on the Iranian border training the Iraqis, he was not psychologically prepared to go to combat. He was in a training environment. We got orders to go to Fallujah. And Fallujah, man, some serious combat. And he was kind of losing it. And I went to my command sergeant major, the brigade, and said, Staff Sergeant Ford his head's not on straight. We should not send him down there. And he said, either he goes or he gets demoted. I said, roger that, Sergeant Major. So we brought him to the TMC, we gave him some anxiety medication, doped him up, and let's go. Away we go. So, okay, take it away.
Professionals through evidence-based education. Learn more at lunderduneen.org.
Support for this program provided by Bangor Savings Bank, Warren and Brandy Cook, the Lunder Foundation. Additional support provided by Roxana and Hamilton Robinson, and viewers like you. Thank you.
Every other month, I'm notified that one of my staff is going to be deployed. It doesn't necessarily make me angry, it makes me sad, because they come back different, very different.
Everybody around me told me I had it, angry all the time. I feel guilty, I guess, is the biggest thing I feel. I can't hold a job down for some. I've had, I think, about a dozen jobs since 2005.
I was arrested with, initially was charged with attempted murder.
I think asking for help shows weakness. I think that's kind of a leftover from being in the Army.
Grunts
soldiers, Marines have a reluctance to admit defeat or to feel broken a bit. The Army trains very well into this suck it up. Just suck it up. Suffer in silence.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind, our country, our communities, our nonprofits, our faith communities are absolutely not prepared for the epidemic that we face today.
Outside the Sheriff's Office in Augusta, Maine, 6 stars on a sign signify the number of deputies and corrections officers serving overseas. 9 years ago, one of those stars was for Randy Liberty.
I felt called to serve in Iraq. My unit had been activated, but I felt like it was time for me to go. And some of the individuals had deployed twice in the Army system, and I felt like it was time for me to do my duty.
You knew about death
Yeah,
going into this.
Mhm.
You've been a sheriff's deputy,
Yeah.
but you weren't prepared for it.
No, nothing prepares you. And, you know, at the time, I think I've been in law enforcement 24 years or something, and who knows, maybe, 35, 40 fatal accidents and a lot of suicides and unattended deaths and a lot of gunshot wounds, self-inflicted. Firefighter EMT cop types that go to war already have some scarring, emotional scarring, I think, from the stuff that we are exposed to. But nothing prepares you for the violence of war.
In 2004, Liberty was a 40-year-old sergeant major ordering 18 and 19-year-old American soldiers into battle.
Hey, go up. Okay, move it up.
He fought for most of the 10 months in Fallujah, a particularly brutal war zone. Liberty recorded these images with his cell phone.
On average, we did 25 to 30 combat patrols a day. All hours of the night, sporadically searching the houses, kicking in doors. It's you or him. Combat is a real combination of fear, deep sorrow, exhaustion, adrenaline, sleeplessness, and complacency, but hypervigilance. The violence is horrific. The violence of a 50 cal or a mortar or a roadside bomb is just, it's indescribable. Dying that happens in combat is not like movies. It's a lot of moaning and crying and you frantically trying to save something you care about. I hit 2 roadside bombs while I was there. I felt the extreme heat and fire. I could feel the concussion in my organs sort of, and I blacked out. We all kind of came to. I spun it around. I went back through the kill zone.
Randy, which is worse? Having to kill somebody, another human being?
Yeah.
Or sending one of your people into a dangerous place?
The civilian casualties that are unattended, your unattended deaths, those are the worst. The women and children, the old folks that you didn't intend to kill.
Liberty returned home in late 2005. He knew things were different, but he thought he would be okay.
It's just nothingness, just quiet nothingness. You're not sure how to act, really. And then 2 days later, and they go through a question, do you have any injuries? And everybody's like, no, I'm good, regardless if you are or not, because you want to get home. And then you fly home, and very green here, very quiet, and people don't understand. If I walk on Water Street in Augusta, those 3, 4, 5-story buildings, that would be like walking down through this Fran, was the main drag in Fallujah. And we're constantly 360 looking at my troops, looking for identifying targets. So when I came back, new experience for me. I didn't know, I thought maybe after a short period of time, I'd be okay and just suck it up and be okay.
Okay, so that was a taste of, you know, matter of duty. If you have any interest in spending some time. Got it? No?
Okay, just hold it close.
Got it. So that was a taste of a matter of duty. If you have any interest in watching that, you can Google Maine Public Broadcasting, a matter of duty. And it's kind of a nice tool too. I share with veterans or other people that are struggling with post-traumatic stress. They can watch it on their own at home and kind of see that other people are struggling, and it's important that they recognize this isn't a journey you have to travel by yourself. Many of us have issues surrounding many different trauma sources, and you know, there's light at the end of the tunnel with proper treatment and you know, mentorship and get through it together. And I think that it's important that whoever is traumatized and has post-traumatic stress, you owe it to yourself to get help, to get treatment, and work through this. You owe it to your families. Life can be good again, you know, beyond the trauma. Don't be a victim of that. Okay, I'm almost out of time. I want to save a little bit of time for questions. Any questions? Really? I covered the topic so thoroughly, there's nothing more to say. Huh? Yes?
I get the sense that something happened in the past, say 10, 15 years to you, where there was a sudden change. You kind of got it on a personal level. Was anything like that, and what might have caused that?
It did. So what, I was always very, I had been in the Army system 23 years at that point, training, and went to Iraq, I went to Italy, went to Korea, all peacetime stuff. And it wasn't until I went to Fallujah, witnessed the violence, witnessed the changes in my men, and that I really got it, that I really understood the depth of damage that's done to soldiers that deploy, and the sense of my duty. I had to assist. It was really important for me to help these guys. There's a saying in the Marine Corps and the Army that no man is left behind. To me, that means when they return, they are not left alone. No one's left behind. We do what we can to assist them. You know, they make mistakes, they have issues, and I'm there to help them until they get back on track. I don't want them to be thrown away, like we've done in the past with other veterans, other people of trauma. It's not only, you know, combat and soldiers and Marines, but firefighter, EMT, law enforcement, high rates of suicide because of the exposure of the stuff that they see and do or involved in. A lot of times I did the rescue diving thing, a lot of my guys had deep guilt when we did the after-action review. If I'd only been there 10 minutes earlier, if I'd only packed this, or I forgot to pack my that, if I'd been just that much closer, I could have saved the child, you know? And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on, you know? That's what did it for me, actually serving in combat. Yes?
Since, now I'm not going to assume you're the armed forces moccasins, of course, but since in life sometimes people learn various different techniques to try to help them, like the concept of talking, the expression talking works.
Sure.
Another one, well, one idea I stumbled on myself some years ago is I stumbled on this, the idea of using, there's the concept of a trigger, like you mentioned the idea of an odor. But you know, the something that can bring memory back to a bad experience. Well, I discovered some years ago that, I'll use an example, I was on a Samaritan's helpline, a helpline that's in another part of New England, not jurisdiction-based, if anybody needs it. That when because of growing up, my enormous love for people, not a neighbor, that came in later years. Well, of course, it's always been with me. But then there was a certain example when I reached out to a helpline. I've been in touch with them anyway. Mm-hmm. And the particular person on the phone line had a strong accent. See my face beam already just at the thought of it.
Sure.
And because of my enormous love for people and people around the globe, and always having a lot, and you know, that can represent culture and adventure and our desire to be extra neighborly and extra welcoming and these enormous, so you see, all these things I just said come up in my memory and how good I feel about all that and bringing up positive memories of the past. You see, I just now referred to all kinds of positive memories at a time I had called to deal with some trauma. That helped. One other tip I found that helped is, separate from that, separate from triggers, is I discovered that over the course of years, if I discovered I was starting to feel uncomfortable, or even before that, or I knew something might trigger a memory that's uncomfortable, in time, what I'd do is I'd start calling helplines earlier and earlier. Not wait till, the worst, but in time I learned that by calling earlier and earlier, that in time that was one of the things that helped me with healing.
Those are great tips, thank you. Ma'am, you have a question back?
I just wondered, what percentage of the state inmate body are veterans? Any rough idea?
Yeah, so we have 2,400 in the statewide system. I have 1,015 at the Maine State Prison, and we've identified about 120 at the prison. Yeah, and those are self-reported, and we're working with Togus VA through a Versa system to verify that, to make sure that their reporting is accurate. But about that, about 120 are there. Yeah. And some of veterans happen to be a veteran, didn't deploy, no issues surrounding their service. Others are chronic, 3 or 4 tours that have impacted them significantly. Yes, sir. Young man up front.
Well, I've been retired for 30 years, come April 1st. 2 years in Vietnam. And,
Still there.
I know. Yeah, I know.
It's still there. And what it brings back, especially for the Vietnam vets, is how we were treated when we got back.
I agree.
And that's where a majority of the trauma for us comes from.
Yeah, I agree. I can see where that would be. One of the things we tried to do, or we did, myself and Colonel Mosier, about 5 years ago, we knew that the Vietnam veterans hadn't been welcomed back appropriately. So Waterville Winslow, there's a 2-cent bridge, and we did a welcome home Vietnam veterans, and it went really well. I think we had 500 veterans on the Winslow side, and we had 1,000 citizens on the other side. And when they walked across the bridge, they filled out a 5x8 card that said their name, their rank, their service, and their date of service in Vietnam. When they arrived to my side, they handed that to me, and on a loudspeaker, I announced Ronald Raymond, Corporal, U.S. Marine Corps, 1968, Idrang Valley, welcome home Ron. 1,000 people, welcome home Ron, Wow. And so that was really a lot of tears, a lot of finally, and then we had some giveaways and some music, and it was really wonderful. And whatever communities can do to help those Vietnam veterans, they got a real rotten deal, and we owe them a debt of service. And that's about separating the war from the individual.
And I want you to know, I am enormously grateful you're here today. I'm grateful you made it back, and I very appreciate your service. And I send you, if you don't mind, hugs, a huge neighborly air hug.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for you. First of all, I very much enjoyed your talk, and this is not something that I knew very much about to begin with. In sitting and listening to this, I recognize these things in a member of my own family, and I don't think that he ever would associate himself with PTSD or would think about these things in this way. I think culturally and generationally, it's not something that would even cross his mind.
Right.
Do you have any suggestion for, maybe clearly he's doing just fine, but would you have any advice if you recognize these things in someone? The last thing I want to do is say, oh, hey, I saw this talk, and you should really think about this.
Randy says.
Yeah, exactly. But would you have...
So for me, it's really the individual. Sometimes the pain is so deep that they retreat that in their mind and they don't want to talk about it. They won't mention it. It's funny. We'll say, "Geez, I didn't know. Your grandfather was in Bastogne, Battle of Bulge." He never talked about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's so painful that it's best just to leave it alone. On the soft, though, I find that something that's very useful for me is to be with other peers that have had shared experiences. So just on the light, you're joking, you're talking, in sort of a, able to kind of process that. And that's what happens in these veterans pods. They talk and they're able to leave and go back to their cell and just kind of ease into it at their level. Really, it's his call. But again, we indoctrinate soldiers and Marines that do the hand-to-hand stuff, the close stuff, to be tough. I don't want to hear you whining and sniveling. Suck it up. And then when they walk away from service, they don't want to talk about it often. It's helpful for me to talk about it. Let that out, be emotional about it, try to share and help in some way, make sense of it. Yes?
I mean, I think for vets, the place to go is Togus. But everybody else, there's a lot of other people that have PTSD. And the civilian doctors and psychiatrists, many of them don't have a clue. Because some of the doctors, psychiatrists that they have at the VA, the only thing they know is what's in a book.
Right.
They don't know us. And, you know, I've been there now for 4 years, every week. And when it started, we had a psychiatrist that was talking to us, and one of the things that came out was, well, you know, you can say no. Can we say no?
No.
And, you know, and telling people, adults, well, you can say no. No, not with the mindset. Not with our mindset, we can't. It's do it.
Yeah, one of the things the Army did for me is, and it drives my staff crazy, both at the Sheriff's Office and the prison, I can do anything. I can, and we can accomplish anything. They're looking at me like, we don't have the manpower, we're going to get this thing done. Jump on my back, we're going to get this thing done. So, you know, one of the things that, good and bad, you know, if you were able to do and accomplish crazy things in combat, the stuff we do now, I haven't had a bad day since. My staff comes running in, ah! Is anyone bleeding? No, everybody's okay. We'll figure this thing out, and we do, right? So it really is, it puts things in perspective, I guess.
And I'll say, one thing for me, where I found some therapy, as Ray knows, I volunteer at the state prison. Have for 20 years. And that's one of my therapies.
I'll tell you, for people who volunteer at the prison, they are fed. They get fed. And so, you're all selfish that volunteer. But it's true, the work I do at the prison, I am fed every day. I leave with a smile on my face because I feel it's meaningful, purposeful work. I think most of us want to find meaning and purpose in our lives. Law enforcement, being a soldier, being a warden, feeds me. I am full. I have a big belly because of the stuff that I can do with the inmates at the prison. And if you have any interest in doing anything at the prison, or I would invite anybody here in this room to come take a tour. It'll take me about an hour and a half, 2 hours to run you through. You would be very, very impressed at the environment, at the politeness and generosity and articulateness of the inmates, and you're going to find real meaning in the time you spend there. The Intensive Mental Health Unit is a gem for the mental health system in the state of Maine. If Riverview struggles with a violent offender, they come to the Intensive Mental Health Unit and they thrive. Same with the county jails. If they can't deal with that personal mental illness, they thrive there. The industries program, the vocational program, the faith-based programming, the agricultural program you guys have been hearing a little bit about, all that stuff is fantastic stuff. I'd love to have you come down. Email me. We can come as a group. You can come down with 75 people if you want. Just need your name, date of birth, and we'll do a background check on you, make sure you're not going to plan a breakout, and then we'll run you through. And the volunteers that are here today, I think you'll attest to, is meaningful, purposeful time, isn't it? It's time well spent. It really is. This is a facility that you spend $29 million a year, 1,015 inmates. And if you believe in redemption, you can be part of that journey back for some of these folks.
I mean, my wife and I have been going in there for 20 years. There are inmates in there that call her mom. And this guy is calling me dad.
Yeah, it's real. It's real. They really deeply appreciate the time.
And they're our family.
Yeah, meaningful stuff. Okay, I promised only an hour, and I have a hard time wrapping things up. So thank you for all coming. It's been a joy.
Thank you so much.
Which is, one last quick thing is